everyone. Welcome back to our podcast, No More Secrets. As always, I'm your niece, Katie Albrecht.
And I'm your aunt, Mary Albrecht. And today we are honored to have a guest in person, not even remote. Her name is Melissa. Please say hello to everyone, Melissa.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, Melissa.
Thank you for driving up from Deerfield?
Buffalo Grove area.
Oh, Buffalo Grove, yeah. So
That's not too bad of a
it was
drive,
interesting,
right?
yeah, when we found out we were pretty nearby, you know. But I met Melissa through another guest of ours, Sally, and she thought that Melissa had a very interesting story and that I should reach out, which I did. And when I first talked to you, you said that usually you don't do these kind of things.
Yeah,
but
true.
something kind of made you think you should open yourself to it. Is that correct?
That's very true.
Yeah, so I'm glad you did. And you have so many stories. Your life, you know, is like packed with so much stuff. It's hard to know where to start. But I think where I would like to start is what I got from you is that you had this one life that was just going this way, and it's all you knew, and it, you know, was full and busy and whatever. And then you had a point in time where you kind of broke or started to break, and then your life unfolded into a whole different life. And so I call it the before and the after. And so maybe you could explain what your life was before, you know, just kind of summarize.
Sure.
And then what broke you, what, you know, started your dark night of the soul, which you're going to explain. And then kind of what your life started to evolve into. What was that?
My stomach growling.
Okay.
Must be lunchtime.
Yeah. There's cheese sticks afterwards.
Yes,
Oh, excellent. That's good. That's good.
So yeah, before you were married, you know, had, you know, that whole thing.
Yeah, so we'll call it pre-2006 because the event actually happened in January of 2006. I was married and I had, let's see, 1, 2, 3 kids. Yes, Jacob was born already by then. He was 2. And then 2 other daughters. And, you know, living, I guess, the typical life. Both my first husband and I at the time were going to school full time, working full time, really packing it on, you know,
Doing
and
PTA, all the sports.
And then we also took care of his 2 nieces when their mother abandoned them, starting when I was pregnant with my son. So, you know, it was definitely very full. And then my dad suffered a stroke in 2006 in January. And that just, as anyone can expect, rocked my world.
Sure.
I'm from Kentucky originally. So I was still in Illinois, but had to then go to Kentucky and see him and visit him.
And start taking care.
And start taking care, not as much as my aunts. I do want to give them all the credit for sure. But to help out a little bit, my brother and I would visit at least one weekend a month to help while going to school full time, while taking care of all these
And
kids,
having
being
5
pregnant.
kids. Yeah. Oh my God.
Yeah, so that really was what, like I said, the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak, and really added that extra stress in my life that broke everything.
You became
Open.
lost.
I became lost. And so I found myself moving from what I always felt I was like a black and white type of person, right?
Like between right and wrong.
Between right, like,
Okay.
you know, there's one way to live and that's it, you know, based on how I...
Okay. That was
You
Shane.
tried so hard to be quiet.
It's
I'm
okay.
sorry.
Open it. All right. Don't notice me. Just keep
He was tippy-tapping around and then just... Oh my gosh.
That was a funny moment.
resume.
We're going to keep that on.
Yeah. Okay. So your dad had a stroke. It sounds like he lived through that stroke.
He did end up living 3 years after,
Okay.
but it happened in the back of his brain stem, so they couldn't do any surgery, and it was past medication by the time he was, you know, found from my aunt, and yeah, it was tough, and so we didn't know if he was going to make it. Most of January, like he was, and then there was the rehabilitation and all that stuff. And my dad was left-handed, and unfortunately, that was the side that the stroke took.
Ooh.
So he was never really the same.
Could
and
he
they
communicate and stuff?
Oh, for sure, he
Okay.
could definitely communicate, but he was just different. They say with stroke patients, they tend to be more hostile afterwards and
Yeah.
upset and that kind of stuff. And I definitely noticed that with my dad, saying things he would have never, said to me before. And you kind of have to take it with a grain of salt because they pre-warn you with like lists of papers that say, okay, you might experience this. And, and he was a very proudful man too, and so to have to go through that where his daughter had to help him go to the bathroom and one time he fell in the tub and here I am 5'2" and 100 at that time 125 pounds trying to lift my 250-pound dad out of the shower. It's very humbling for us all, and I just had a short glimpse of what that looked like. He had my aunts that were there day in and day out with medications and things like that. So it was shortly after that I think my soul was looking for respite. I never thought I'd find myself in an affair. And yet that's exactly what happened.
This black and white person where marriage is this, you never have an affair.
Suddenly you're in a puddle of gray. Yeah.
Yep.
An ocean of gray.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So it's everything that maybe I would have judged consciously or unconsciously. I don't think I walk around judging, but we all judge, right? So all those things that might have been hidden judgments or even the very obvious judgments were just coming to forefront, really. Well, when your life looks like this and you don't know what to do, some people would say outside of that, they'd say, well, I wouldn't do that. And that was very much me. But when you're in it, it's just a whole different ballgame. There was almost even no thinking. You just are reacting to your life. That's what, if I could give it a word, that would be it. I was just reacting, trying to survive. And hindsight's 2020. There was a lot of I knew a physical trauma and verbal trauma, but later in my journey, I found out there was also sexual trauma. And so some of the stories where I would ask, I mean, it sounds odd, but I would, just think, I feel like I was sexually abused. Like I'd have these random, and I don't think we all walk around with that, right? Like, and I never could understand why would I think like that. And then later in part of my journey and story, all that was revealed, and then those pieces of the puzzle that always felt like it was missing in my life just started to come together. It made sense why I was angry, it made sense why I didn't like a certain person, and why things were harder, and why I did believe in that black and white. And I was trying to create this perfect life, perfect family.
You were trying to band-aid it.
Without knowing that I was...
Without knowing why. Knowing at all.
How did it get revealed? Did you, like, through therapy, did you, like, kind of, like, or release old traumas that you didn't, like, maybe suppressed, or? So in that journey, I've had therapists off and on, and they were very supportive and helpful, but nothing really ever revealed the sexual abuse. It was and I loved them. They were great, and they really helped me. Where it really started to turn was when I went and found Sedona Soul Adventures. The questions that I'd always had, like I said, I feel like I was always, started to come into play in these healing sessions with people that had never met me, doing sound healing, doing aroma healing, doing all these things I'd never heard of. Now it's almost common day, a common practice, but for a lot of people, but I had never heard of that. Right. So I'm in there just, to back up a little bit, how I got there is, after months of having this affair, I didn't want to live anymore because that wasn't me. And I just couldn't come out of this depression and now throw on that shame and guilt of the affair. And, and so there was a couple points where I nearly died. And, I'm like, I just can't keep doing this. My kids deserve better. And,
yeah, you said you were drinking heavily.
Yeah, we were. So in the person that I had the affair with, who's now my husband, actually, we would go out karaokeing and my spirit would come alive. But then I'd have one martini and then two and then three and then four and five sometimes. And these were straight up vodkas, really not even martinis. So, and, the everywhere where I was rigid and stuck was coming open just in the only way that I was able to allow it, which was alcohol, right? So, and I probably can look back on my past where maybe there were some moments with alcohol similar to like that, but nothing
where it was every weekend and kind of doing this. So this one time I just looked on the computer and I'm like, I need, I don't know, a spiritual retreat or something, Mexico, Spain. I Googled it, and then Sedona Soul Adventures pops up, and I just said to myself, isn't Sedona in Arizona? And so I said, this is weird. And so I clicked it. And when I read it, I started crying. And I just knew, I don't know what this is, but I have to go there.
Were you still married?
I was in the process of the divorce.
Did he find out about the affair?
I told him.
Yeah, because you said you had a great relationship, right?
I
And
actually
just
told
really
him.
open and
So when what I shared with you in the beginning is like, the moment I started having trouble, Enrique, we worked together. No, I said his name. Well, it's okay. He came around the corner, and before anything even happened, a date, I like you, anything, I knew deep in my being, it was like someone speaking through me, I'm in trouble. I'm in trouble.
Was it someone you knew before?
in your soul, right?
I felt it deep in my soul, like something telling me you're in trouble.
Yeah, and
Not just you like this guy or he's cute, you're in trouble. Is exactly what I heard.
they worked together, right?
Because we worked together.
Okay, so you knew him before.
I knew him from working, and I did not like
and it
him.
was like
I'll be
a,
honest.
It was like
I
a
didn't like
moment
him.
that just changed.
So there was a moment,
Yeah.
and I have it so vivid in my brain because he came around the station, like server station, and I just went. It was the first time I felt something for someone else other than my husband, and that's why I knew. And it was beyond just attraction because I'd had that before. This was here, and later some of the soul adventure journeys, they, tell this story that they could see him as a soulmate, and he came in because if he didn't come in, I wouldn't have left my husband, and it was time to move on because my soul has a mission here and all these things that, of course, when they're telling me, I'm thinking, what? It did not. Now it's second nature. I talk like that, right? But I was like, oh, okay, I'm not really resonating with that. But
so
maybe.
then did you tell him right away, your husband?
So let's see. When we were actually, we tried for many months between January and May. It was not physical. It was all by phone and work and flirting and talking and that kind of stuff. In May was when we actually were physical, and I think I told my husband by the end of May or June. I could not live with it that
deal
long.
with the guilt.
Was it already a decision that you were going to leave your husband at the time, or was it?
I was still very stuck.
And still, okay.
I was so stuck.
And probably in a cycle of, like you said, the shame.
Yeah,
and,
I wish there's
but
a
also
way.
Love. And there was a lot of
it's like living two lives.
Emotions.
I mean, that's, you can, there's no more black and white now. You can understand how people can get in these predicaments.
We're in the ocean of gray right now.
We're in the ocean of gray.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what it was. And on the one hand, here's my first husband, who I know what that is, and it's very stable and very unconditional. Yet we were always fighting all the time, and sometimes even fighting so much it was almost physical. We never really did, but it was getting there, and not that deep connection or understanding that I was always longing for, and yet it fit the pattern of past relationships that always said it was me. I'm too emotional.
You're the wrong one.
I'm the wrong one, right? And I don't think he meant it. I don't think we all mean that when we're doing it. I just think we don't understand each other, right? And so he couldn't understand me, and that was his best way of dealing with it, because we are still good friends there, and now he can see differently, but also because now he's had a soul relationship, and so he can go this with this new wife,
new person. Yes. Okay.
So then I told him, and
Was he shattered?
oh,
That must have been one of the harder things you've ever done.
that was and it just kind of blurted out, and it was after a family dinner, so the kids were outside, and and it was hard. It was hard, but I could not, for both of us, continue that way. And sometimes I feel like in these things we don't even get it's hard to say, but we don't get a choice. We do, but we don't, because when you're reacting, I don't feel there's choice in that. You're just in the spiral of the trauma and the patterns, and you don't even know. So now fast forward, and you can see it's been partly also because of this trauma. It's like, everything just clicks and makes sense. And then you're at a different consciousness and understanding
from the healings and all this stuff. So those experiences just don't come your way because you're of a different conscious level now. So before you're of the conscious level of a trauma response. I was always angry and things had to be perfect, and I had to, be in control, perfectionist.
Interesting.
Like I was the one that had all the A's, right? Like, and then you learn you cannot control life.
Yeah.
You cannot.
Not only that, it's
life.
important to be open to watching for the lack of control, if that makes sense, or watching for the signs of the growth that you need, or the opening, like
and
you
I
say.
think, and then I've witnessed it in my own clients, like they can't tell you they're controlling, right? Like we can't sometimes see it of ourselves, or it's kind of a societal norm to joke it off. Oh, you're
like
type A.
like
You know what I
OCD.
mean? Like we've got to throw that. And it just becomes almost like a cliche, right? Like, and so we don't really ever get raw with that, or underneath, well, am I? And if I am, do I like these parts of myself? And why is that? And so I think this life was showing me this journey. You're kind of hard on yourself, and you're kind of hard on others, even though I was maybe felt I was so giving, and maybe people would tell me I was so giving and so helpful. I think underneath that it was just a surface.
So when you started to be with the second your current husband, were you was that when it was starting to come out of the dark night that you
No,
called
my
it?
dark night of the soul lasted so 2006. It was about 2011 when I finally felt like I was.
So it was years.
Yeah, it was slowly started when I became pregnant with Sophia, my daughter, 2009. And, then it, you have to take care of yourself. You can't drink anymore. You can't do these things, right?
Yeah.
And so it was like all the like then you really see the destruction you created. When you can't drink it away, when you can't numb it out, then the shame, like the guilt, the lack of forgiveness to myself really started to shine through. And then I could really see my actions for what they were.
Okay.
When I was going through the actions and having the affair, it was just a release to feel good inside myself, and that's why I think people drink, or people have take drugs, or use sex, or whatever
It's a
addiction.
vice. Yeah.
It's a vice, right? Like it's a way to, you don't know you're coping. You're just wanting to feel good. Like you want it to stop. You want the pain to stop. You want the sadness to stop, And I don't, at that time, it's not like I could say it in those words. If I could, probably none of that would have been happening, right?
Right.
But in hindsight, I can give you those words that's what that was for me.
So you were happy in the moments when you were with your second husband, but then the guilt and the shame.
Go
and the
home,
being lost
start it all
and-
over again, just like a drug,
Just like, oh man, I got drunk again. Damn.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Was that, and I don't know if you guys have talked about this or not, but was that a challenge that you and your current husband had to like overcome together because you were kind of dealing with all that stuff? Or
Gosh, like he,
I'm just curious because it's
no, he is, I don't know how he does it, honestly. In the back and forth, he just was there, which is odd. And especially being Latino, like it's unheard of. And,
Yeah, culturally.
it's not,
Yeah.
which was my first husband also, right? So there was a lot of anger
Oh, boy.
from my first husband, and even almost he said he'd had visions of going and beating him up. Like he was really angry and hurt, and I can definitely understand that. And my second husband wasn't like that. We just were riding a roller coaster, and maybe he wasn't sure if I was like the one, or we both said we weren't getting married, and
just felt day by
we
day
were just
felt
day by
right.
day with each other,
Yeah.
and we were kind of in it, and at the same time couldn't separate. And I think that's the soul part. Like,
Yeah.
I literally thought I would die if I separated from him. That was literally what I would say to my girlfriend one time, actually, and she said to me, I think this has something to do with the sexual abuse from your stepfather. And I don't know why, but once she said that, everything just started changing and shifting and opening up. Like, because I never made the connection to that point that my behaviors might have been the result of trauma.
Okay.
Even though I'd studied psychology and I'd studied all this stuff,
yeah.
but not me, I guess, you know.
That came out in the retreat, right?
No, this was just even with a friend. And when did that happen? Was that before or after? I want to say that comment was before.
Excuse me.
And then the retreat happened. And yeah. And so in that retreat with these healers, I remember having conversations with my second husband at the time that says, you know, I kind of am answering some questions that I've always had about being sexually abused. And I just said, what do you think about that? And he's like, well, I've actually always thought that. And I went, now he has a psych background, right?
Yeah.
He studied Freud and all this stuff. And he's like, it explains why you would cry after sometimes we'd have sex. And I had like a lot of times I would cry, especially with, and I, you know, some of it would chop it up to the fair or whatever. But then if I'm really real and raw and honest, and that's why we're having this, right? We were so beautifully connected and it was so conscious and so sensual with one another. I think he was opening me more. Not he was opening me more. I was opening more in ways with him that I'd never really opened with another partner. And so that was what was ripping the Band-Aid off, right?
Sure.
Also. So then I started, well, if he feels that and they're saying that, and I've always thought this and said these things which never made sense to me, then I'm going to like kind of sit with that and see what happens. But all of these people who didn't know me were able to say or do or express things towards me without, how would they know? Here I am in Arizona, I'm from Illinois and originally from Kentucky. Like, it's not like they could find my background or, you know, especially my intimate stuff. So the one that changed a lot of it was the very last person I saw. We'd been sitting outside. She was kind of getting the gist of it. And she said, you know, it sounds like someone that's had some sexual abuse, blah, blah, blah. I can help you through this. We can go back to that time, you know, spiritually, basically speaking, if you want to. And, you know, remember, I'm new to all this. So I'm like, I guess so. Like, you know, so she takes me back in. She sets it all up. And she has this process, which is like a whole long process. But pieces of my life that were my comfort, like my grandfather that I couldn't get over when he died, like all these things were being brought through in that session. And she actually stepped back outside because it started raining and she had left the cushions out. And my experience happened when she wasn't even in a room. And I was brought to a moment where I was in the closet after the event of being sexually abused by my stepfather, and then him telling me that he would kill my mom if I told anybody. And this was like, you know, I was like 4 or 5 years old. And the tears and the wholeness and just the validation through your own soul that it's true. And she wasn't even around to coerce that into happening. And then for me, the clincher of it all is when I left Sedona after all these sessions, I felt so much peace begin to open in my life.
Wow.
In that moment and after. And then actually gifts started actually opening as well.
Yeah.
But that's how I knew it had to be true. Because those pieces that throughout my life were like Swiss cheese and I could not through anything fix it, make it better, were healed.
And you always hated this person.
And I
didn't know
always,
why.
it was
You
the
don't
only
hate
person in my
people.
life
Yeah.
that I've said. And people would say, oh, your father. No, he is not my father. Like I would
Not even stepfather.
clench.
He's the person my mom married.
My body would clench around him. So, in being respectful, he's still my stepfather to my sister and 2 brothers. So I would have to see him every once in a while. And every time I was around him, my physical body would just tighten up.
Yeah.
Now, in hindsight, I recognize what that is. In the moment, I'm like, what is happening?
Why do I hate him so much? Yeah.
And I knew I was free that when my brother got married, he asked me to write something. And so I did. And it was not more sentimental. My brother did the funny and I did the sentimental. And when I came down, when it was over, my stepdad approached me to tell me how wonderful of the writing that it was. My body did not close down for the first time. Now, this was, I think they got married in 2013. It was actually after my first trip to Peru. So after doing all this healing
he had
work,
no
I didn't
power
say
over you
anything.
anymore.
No power over me. You know, and does he even know or remember? I mean, he's an alcoholic and has done some drugs, and
He's still alive?
he's still alive. And
Is your
you know,
mom?
my mom is too, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And my mom and I, when I was in Sedona, I would call her up and say, what do you think of this? Do you think this is, like, I just openly,
Yeah.
I think that probably threw her off a little bit, but
Yeah.
she was, I think she was embracing of it because part of her probably had some intuitive knowing. Probably she knew I changed at some point and couldn't figure it out why.
Do you think it was just once?
No, I have a memory that still stands. I'm like 4 years old. I'm in one of the back rooms and I'm in my underoos. I don't remember those. You probably don't, but you may remember what those were.
But yeah.
Well, the underoos were like big deal for kids. They were like your Wonder Woman or your R2D2s, you know.
Yeah.
And I was playing strip poker.
Oh, with him.
Probably him in a group. I just remember people being in the room.
Huh.
Yeah. Why? And that was even before the healings. That memory has always been. So who was there? Who was allowing this to happen?
Yeah,
know.
isn't...
It's crazy.
it sounds... Yeah.
It's interesting that like it all this came out from something that wasn't even entirely related. It was just stress in general. Like it was started from your dad getting sick, and then all of a sudden you're feeling the stress, and it's like it's been repressed for so long, and then it has just no choice but to like pour out of you and every
Yeah,
way,
at
pretty
some
much.
point you get cracked open, you know, like there's no
And then this
going back.
this is like the process of you, like you said earlier, I think it was you were no longer asleep, right?
Right.
And is that through the these retreats that you went to, or was it like through Peru, or when did that start to happen?
For me to be able to verbalize it that way would probably be through Peru, because
Okay.
in Peru we worked with the medicine, so we call it Dr. Wachuma. It's known as San Pedro here, and also ayahuasca. And so in those sessions it works ancestrally, time lineage wise, like from my experience, there's, you know, more expanded than just this timeline. And so the healings that were happening from that, in addition to the other work, you know, was just profound. In the clearings and the healings that it would take, and being in the temples of these places. One of the temples that we went through is a very tiny cave, and it's in, I will say it wrong because I don't speak Quechua, but Saskatchewan. It's the Puma temple, and there's a very teeny tiny cave. Now, I don't know. I don't do research usually. In fact, when the calling happened, I just went, didn't look anything up, didn't know what the medicine was, didn't know these things, right? So, and the first trip is when I experienced the San Pedro. The second trip, I brought a group of people, and that's when we experienced this cave. So they do the clearing, they do the opening, and then you enter this cave. Well, this cave is so tight that you can only get through by holding, right. See, if I knew, I probably wouldn't have done it myself. You have to put your hand to the right and your hand to the left, and you literally have to feel the cave as it narrows in to guide you out, and it's pitch black.
That's gonna be a no for me.
Yeah.
I don't.
Now that you know about it, right? I didn't know about it.
Yeah. I
So halfway
have
through,
some claustrophobia, I think.
yeah, halfway through, I couldn't move.
Okay.
And it felt like I went into my inner womb. And all I could see was my stepfather, right? It was like I was stuck there,
Wow.
right? In the trauma, in the thing. But it was like a void. It was a darkness. It was because the cave was dark.
dark.
I'm dark. I can't see anything dark. And then I hear my shaman healer brother, Renee, say, calling me, Melissa, Melissa. And I can hear him, but I still can't move.
Oh my gosh.
Still can't move. And at the same time, there was no fear.
Really?
That's the odd part. At the same time, it felt very healing. Like I was able to actually face it, see it.
And come out of it.
And then when I was ready, not when Renee was calling me ready, but when I was ready, I could move again. And once I did, from then on, it just kept opening and blossoming. I mean, every moment in Sedona and after, and even parts of the dark night, like every moment, it was like part of the mud of the lotus, I say, right, to help it blossom. Every grain of dirt
matters, right? So
what led you to Peru? Was it a calling, you said?
yeah, so Peru was never on my bucket list, not even for Machu Picchu, believe it or not. Just
Yeah.
not something I ever thought I would do. So how it went was, short version. As I started coming out of the dark night of the soul, I actually decided, because I had dropped my master's program in that period of having the affair and stuff, my dad and situation. So I said, it's time to go back. And I found ITP, which is now Sophia University out in California. And they are all about spiritual. So once, I'd had that Sedona experience, there was no going back. And so I found the right school. I applied for my master's. And of course, my one professor was named Robert. I probably should have said that. I'm bad at that. Sorry. Anyway, he was a shaman and he led vision quests. And I said, I need that. And I thought I was going to release more emotional stuff, but I ended up having this experience where a cougar actually peed over my tarp during my vision fasting.
A real cougar?
A real cougar. I actually have prints of his paw print right behind my tarp.
You. What was
Well,
that?
Yeah.
for me, that was profound. So I know
You want to elaborate on that?
yeah. So in a shaman's world, like we're not really, we're connected to all things. Where I was living before, and I definitely would have been afraid of this puma. But so we have this fasting, and I had started a day early, as they said you could if you wanted to. So it was a 12-day experience, 3 days fasting, or you can start it, extra day early. So I did that, and then you go out solo in this canyon where he was doing them. And it's all done very sacred, and there's ceremony and all that stuff with it to help you kind of go down the rabbit hole, so to speak, right? And so I'm starting to have my experience, and it kind of feels like I'm faking it till I make it, like, oh, what am I supposed to do now, And you're fasting to have a vision.
Okay, right. Yeah.
And I'm going, well, when's this vision? Where's the vision? Is it now? Was that it? You're in your head, right? Well, of course, mine comes in the middle of the night, and it sounds like something's behind me. And I am frightened. Can't find my flashlight because, of course, it fell to the bottom. I'm just wrapped up in my tarp. There's no tent. There's nothing, right?
Oh, my God.
And I hear, as clear as day, face your fears. And I'm like, I am not opening my tarp. And I finally at some point do, and I just go like this, like just a very little. And then nothing was there.
But you saw a footprint.
Well, the next day,
Hey, yeah.
it was very clear I was to go back. So I was supposed to do this for, 2 more days, right? And I'm a type A personality. Remember this. So what? I have to go back?
Badge of honor.
No, I got to stay here 2 more days. Like I can't. So I go back. So that was a whole thing, a whole healing process. And so he walks me back to where my experience was. And that's when we found the cougar tracks. And probably, I would think in this experience, I would not have been eaten or attacked, because you're working from a different conscious level. It's kind of like how you see people working with animals that can go up to a lion and nothing happens kind of thing. Like sometimes
But he peed on
he did pee on my tarp. So when I had gotten up that morning, I was like, oh, it's dew. Well, in the desert, there's no dew. And that's when I actually saw that it was yellow. And I was like,
Ooh.
and then later when we found the tracks, then I knew it was a cougar. There were talks of a bear that they have seen, but never cougars. There's, although there could be that chance, but they had never had that experience up to that point. I wasn't expecting to share the story, but it was just fascinating to
Share
me.
that with me before.
So no, we didn't get there because I have a lot of story. But then there was a book being passed around, Animal Speaks by Ted Andrews, which I highly recommend if you ever want to know what the symbolism of animals can mean for you when they show up.
I like it.
And so I read it, and
Animal Speaks.
the cougar was all about owning your power.
Wow.
And so I was being initiated to own my power.
Literally initiated.
Yeah,
The
literally.
urine.
Yeah.
Sounds like
Yeah, and
amazing.
and to most people it sounds crazy. To me, when you're in it and you're feeling the initiation, you're just kind of surrendered to life, like, okay.
And I mean, it's natural, and it's I think there's something really nice being so submerged in nature that it kind of connects you with
Yeah.
it in a way. So I can understand that. Yeah.
And that was a very powerful land, because when we had to get there, we had to find our spot. And so I found mine right away. It looked like my grandparents' farm. I knew it from the pre-vision quest, all this stuff. But the one friend I was with, she traveled the whole canyon and couldn't find her spot. We were down in the kind of valley of it, and we had found some old pottery. It's native pottery. And both of us just started crying, like deep soul. So sometimes you tap into places, like even when I landed in Peru for the first time, even though I had no plan to go, I could not stop crying. People have said this of Jerusalem, like there are just certain spots and times and places where your soul is reuniting
Just
with other
feels
lifetimes you've probably
so-
experienced, that you're remembering, and it's like this home,
like, like you say, the near-death experience, even like where you go and you just feel so
peaceful and at home. And I've done this
alive
before,
even. I mean,
alive, yeah.
Even though it's a near-death experience, you just feel.
And you're free because you don't have your physical
have
body
your
in those
physical body.
particular instances.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So anyway, so you started working with shamans a lot,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, so he was my professor, but also the shaman. And
Yeah.
so we went through that journey. And then I went with a friend to a mind body expo and ended up having an out of the body experience. It was my very first one with this guy. We were supposed to work for 20 minutes. It was like 2 hours long. He's crying. I'm crying. I'm thinking he's crying because he saw the depth of my soul, like in that in a good way, And
Oh no.
it wasn't that at all. Somehow he was receiving, I found out later that he was receiving some healing from me that I didn't even know I was doing at the time. And it had to do with a friend that had passed and just all this stuff. And so when I'm out of the body, I see my grandfather's speaking to me. And it no different than you're speaking to me right now is how I heard it. And the tears and and until you have one of these experiences, like there's just no words, And when I was done, I couldn't, I told my friend, I'm like, I can't go home. Like, I just didn't even feel right in my body because like still coming back, I guess. And then finally, when I was able to go, I knew I'm going home. I'm going to do a 3-day fast. Like, there are just some spiritual things like you're being directed and guided to do. And that really then, this guy is the one that told me, you're going to go to Peru, you're going to work with the shamans, you're going to work with the medicine. And I'm like, what's a shaman?
Right.
What is medicine?
What kind of
In
medicine?
Peru, I've barely been to Mexico. So it was just very like, oh, okay. And then it took about a year and a half or so after that synchronicity would open up and I'd find the group I'd go with. And that was 2013. And talk about love. I mean,
just is a
that just
whole
opened up
different
so much
path.
love. And
Like you say, everything just kept opening.
Just kept opening.
and it still
opening.
is. I mean,
It
like,
still is. Yeah.
And
I think we always are,
where were your kids through all this?
Who knows? No, I'm just kidding.
That's part of the healing process. You
Hey,
get rid of
wait,
them.
I have them. Maybe I should bring them back. And I say that lightly. I know many moms probably go through a lot of that stuff, but
Yeah.
my now husband took care of them every time I went on a trip, and
Even the ones from the first husband?
both of them have
Wow.
actually, yes, both of them. So my first is very playful and friendly with them, and bought presents for them for holidays and birthdays, and if I could wish anything for the world, it would be that. We worked hard for that friendship
Yeah.
to get through, and not even we, I would say my ex worked really hard. I
Yeah.
can't not get emotional about that, because to me that is how I learned unconditional. It's how I learned forgiveness. If this man could be there for me still,
Yeah.
know.
That's true, unconditional.
And I think it's possible with everybody, but in every conversation, we both had to rise. Every single conversation, because some of even our old marital patterns would show up. And as I was changing, I'd have to say, no, I'm not going to react this way. I'm going to choose differently. So yes, a little bit on my part, but a lot on his part of consistently choosing to be conscious, consistently choosing to choose our children, to choose love, because ultimately I feel he did that because he loves me.
Yes.
I still love him. What I learned from the shamans, you can't really turn off love. Like,
you just love who you love.
we think we do, but
Yeah,
that's
you
what
can't.
actually builds the resistance, right? And
you just love who you love.
you just love who you
and
love.
there's all kinds of love too. Now, speaking of the ex-husband, he also adopted your first child. If you want to just share that little piece, that alone could be a whole podcast.
Right.
But we don't have to go so
Yeah.
far to it. But it's just an interesting part of you that it's like, huh? How did
And
these
it's
things
another
happen?
trauma, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's like I could just list out the traumas.
Yeah.
We'd be done much faster than my story and my life. But
Start when you're 2.
right. So when I was about to turn 19, I found myself pregnant, and the person that was my high school love found himself similar to what I was years later, right, with that straw that broke the camel's back, and tried to hire a hitman to kill me. And
To kill you and the baby.
And the baby.
He wanted to kill you because you were pregnant, right?
yes, and didn't want to take the responsibility, and that was
And that was his
very much not
solution.
his character.
Okay.
But remember, he was 18, 19 at the time.
Yeah,
His
yeah.
parents, they loved me. They wanted to force him into marriage because they're very Catholic. I got a lawyer. There's very many stressors, and he didn't know what to do, and he's 19, right? Like, I mean, we're not fully mature at 19. So
Not at all.
There's no rational thinking there. And
But I don't think I thought about hiring a hitman at 19.
well,
to be honest.
true. And also, as I shared in the story, when he was expressing his stress to someone, they said, well, I have also a great idea for you. And this person was known for getting off bad behavior by reporting other people. And that's exactly what he did. So they set up a sting operation based on this man. And then 2 weeks later, that man beat a guy with a crowbar, right? So it's also sometimes when we're in these stressful situations, you're not thinking, you're not rational, and you're just reacting. And so he wasn't thinking the consequences that he'd go to jail and all these things. And like I said, from the beginning, I've probably been way more forgiving. I don't know, but that's just been my natural state to always see kind of a bigger picture, rather than condemning and blaming and judging. It's like, how did we get here? Like how is that possible? And is he okay? Because he wasn't that way. He was a type A personality like me,
So he
had straight
snapped.
A's, and
Yeah.
so he snapped too, right? So it's sometimes not in our control, when we're going to snap. I mean, we've seen this of parents with children when they're misbehaving. We've seen this
When
grown adults on
parents kill their kids.
road rage, I
Yeah,
mean, it's like,
yeah.
exactly. So that happened.
And he went to jail.
And he ended up
because-
going to jail, served time and a half for good behavior. The state's attorney changed, whatever, all that
Because he
happened.
thought the person he was meeting was a hitman, but it was really an
Undercover cop.
cop.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
And then you have
Yeah, it was very hard.
And
And
you-
and
That's a
and
good
later,
plot twist, though. I like
yeah, and later, I mean, there's a lot of interesting spiritual synchronicities, if I may, too. That day was my dad's birthday, actually, August 9th, and my
wow.
friend's birthday. We went to see the movie that's called It Could Happen to You. I was a waitress. This movie was about a waitress and a cop. I mean, it's kind of funny. I gifted my friend an angels book, a book on angels, right? Like, there's just all these things that were like, I'm being watched over, like, but I didn't know it at the time.
Right.
Then I'm hanging out at my friends after the movies, and at one point, this car just keeps passing, and I'm like, something's not right. I need to go. And I wasn't living at home. My mom had another trauma. Kicked me out.
Kicked you out because you were pregnant, right?
Pregnant.
Yep.
She doesn't feel this way now. It was advice from a therapist to tell me that basically if I couldn't have an abortion, that she wouldn't, she couldn't emotionally or financially support me. So my mom followed that advice and left me a letter. And I woke up to that. Yeah, it was tough. It was tough. And
So then you're pregnant.
so I'm living with this other family, pregnant. They took me in, and I get home, all the lights are on, and no matter what time you get in, wake me if I'm asleep. I have to talk to you. And so they break the news, and then I had to go to the police station. I'm 7 months pregnant, and it was just
God.
definitely wasn't what I was expecting. Not that I could even imagine what this would
Did he served
like-
time though, right?
He did serve time.
How much did he, or how long was he in
I
there?
think it was like 7 years total, and he was in and out in 3.5, something like that. Don't quote me on it. It's been a few years.
And you don't talk to him anymore.
Never seen him, never met him. He's not tried to contact me.
Or your daughter.
Or my daughter. She tried to reach out. They ignored and denied. It's just probably too traumatic for everybody.
Were you heartbroken though because it was your high school love?
Yeah, so that's been like the story of my life, where it's like I have to hold the two spaces, right? He's the one that it's your first love kind of
Your
thing,
first love, yeah.
And then he tried to kill you, right? And then other things in my life, it's the same thing. It's like this, but this, it's like, again, that black and white. There's no black and white. Like, how do you just stop the love for someone and also feel angry,
And then feel sad because
sad and grieving
you
and-
had to break up because he
And I will
tried to
be
kill you.
very honest,
So-
I really didn't start grieving until all this like healing shaman Sedona started happening. And there was a woman, she doesn't live here now, she lived in Libertyville, and I went to one of her sessions. And that was when it hit me. He wanted $75 and a watch for my life. That's when it hit me, and I cried on that table.
What?
That's what he
Yep.
paid?
That's what he paid.
Oh, wow.
And it wasn't even a Rolex, by the way. Yeah.
It's like
Oh my God.
That was tough. Yeah, there's a lot of details. I'm sure people can probably search it, and it made Newsweek. It was everywhere.
It was in the
I was
Chicago
fortunate,
Tribune, and yeah.
yeah, because it was happening on the North Shore,
Yeah.
So I was fortunate. They never found me, so they could never interview me. My people I babysat for, her sister did movies, and she was trying to make it into a movie. Never happened, and I don't think it was my path. And
Yeah.
I'm really grateful now that I was open to it at that time, because I'm like, sure, if it'll help somebody else or whatever, but it never happened. They could never find me. They found my brother, my brother gave an interview one time. And I just remember always coming home and having all these pink slips and family members and friends, just so worried because it was on the news. And sometimes you can't get to them fast enough to tell them because you're just still dealing with the emotion. And I called my therapist at the time at 3 a.m. Like,
Yeah.
And you had to.
And they probably
you had-
recognized your boyfriend at the time, right? Or how,
I don't think she ever knew, because she didn't meet him. My therapist, you mean? Or my
like
my
your
family?
your friends and family.
Oh,
that
yeah,
were
they
reaching out.
knew.
Like
yeah,
there he
yeah,
is
yeah,
on the
yeah.
news.
Yeah,
Like,
they see
oh
him
my
and
God.
they know who
Even
his
all the way down to
girlfriend is,
Kentucky,
yeah.
right? Like they,
Yeah.
and I just love my family. They were very supportive, and
And you still had to have the baby. You're going through all this trauma and these emotions.
And then I
you're
had the
7
baby.
months pregnant, and you're 19 or almost 19, and you've never had a baby before.
There was
and
a
then
lot
you gotta
going
have
on.
the baby.
I think if I could say something new that's coming to me, it's like almost because of the trauma that I'd already experienced that I didn't know, there was already a shell around me, right? So in a way that kind of helped me, I think, because perhaps it could have been even worse, and how I dealt with it. But maybe because of already some trauma, I was already kind of tucking and hiding, and I could do that
You
so
just
well.
kept functioning.
So I just
You
kept functioning. I just kept
going.
doing it, and
didn't even really stop to be like, oh my God, this guy tried to do this until
Yeah.
much later when you
yeah,
were
sometimes you
opening.
don't see how strong we are until like,
Yeah.
oh, 75 and a watch, right? Okay.
That's what my life is worth to you and your
And my baby.
babies.
Yeah.
Whatever. Yeah. Like, oh.
And
got
you know,
two
it's
lives.
tough because when you'd see the reports or read the thing, like there would be facts that were wrong, or, and interestingly enough, they actually, I don't know who started it, but someone actually set up a trust fund for him and his family,
Oh.
not me.
What?
Weird, right?
Huh.
So even that happened. So there was just a lot of
You're
weird,
like, wait.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Just a lot of like, what the fuck moments, pretty much.
Yeah. And you made a
Very
comment
much
in the
so.
very beginning about a before and after.
Yeah.
And I truly believe that whatever conscious shift I had, the out of body, the Peru, and all that stuff, it's how I can sit here and just share the story as if, I don't want to say it's nothing, because it's not, but there's no attachment to it anymore. And I feel that is because of all this healing.
Yeah.
And in multiple ways, not just talk therapy, right? It's working with the medicine, it was working with sound healing, and every step of the way, going, doing that vision quest, all this stuff. I don't obviously know what I would feel or say if he were present in front of me. I would hope that I would just continue the practice that I've been learning, and that's just compassion and forgiveness, and just let love lead that conversation, because what would I know, you know?
I feel like and you've said this too, but that you see the full picture. I mean, that stuck out with me when we were talking earlier. Like, you see the person, like the situation, you know that you're a victim in some of these situations, but you also see that, oh, this is why they were acting this way. And I feel like you have a very well-rounded,
fair.
very fair approach.
Yeah, a lot of people told me that. Like, and I didn't realize, and I think I mentioned this to you, there was a moment I was with a client, and she says to me, "But Melissa, you trust life." And it was in that moment I went, people don't trust life? Like, I realized it was like, you know, almost as innate as my freckles. You know, it was like, maybe some people are born with certain kind of natural ways of processing life than others. It really woke me up to,
Not everyone's like that.
not everyone's like that.
Like, you're hopeful, and you keep hopeful in life. as
Yeah,
opposed
through
to giving
every
up.
trauma that I've
Yeah.
had, like when my, you know, even when I was too, right, when my parents divorced, and then a stepdad, and then the abuse from them, and, you know, and just high school alone, that's dramatic enough. And then, you know, and then going through this,
Yeah.
you know, and then the continual unfoldment of all of that. And just whenever anything happens, from people trying maybe to do their best, but they end up betraying you or hurting you, and just always seeing, but in hindsight too, as I did the healing and the gifts just started opening up, I started to remember other times when I was doing these things when I was younger, but they were sometimes blocked, or I didn't think anything of it. Like, you know, channeling people. I had an experience that I really didn't pay too much attention to until after. And I was like, well, at high school age, sophomore, I was a sophomore when it happened. For one random reason, I decided to meditate. I started meditating, and I kind of almost had like an out-of-body experience, and I met my great-grandmother, my grandfather, my grandmother. These were all people that I thought I actually killed because they died after an argument that we'd had, or I didn't behave or whatever, and they all came back to tell me it was not my fault. And I woke up, my entire shirt was drenched in tears, and I didn't even know I was crying. And I didn't even know.
And you're a sophomore. It's
I was
like-
a sophomore in high school. So, well, now I'm helping people, and this is what I do, right? Like, I see things and know things, and it's part of that seeing the big picture. So when someone else comes to me, it's like I can see that trauma that's buried, or what is needed to help them release that. And sometimes it's through the channeling, sometimes it's through other messages or means, but it kind of, even though I say my life is like separate before and after, it really all goes together, you know, like.
You were kind of hitting on that because that's your calling, but it, like you say, it got blocked.
Yeah.
But it was there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good message, right?
yeah,
That
like it's never too
you can't get in your own way, and others
Yeah.
can't get in your way. Like,
it's not too late
life has
to
a plan,
change.
and it's not too late
and
to
pay
change.
attention, right, to what the plan is
Yeah.
for you. Now, what do you actually call yourself? Because at one point you wanted to be a bilingual social worker.
Are you bilingual?
I do. I speak Spanish. I do Spanish.
I do speak the Spanish.
And
I don't speak English, clearly, but
English really well too.
I think that's a funny thing, because when certain friends that are of Latin descent will always say, I just don't see you as a white girl, you know, like, because in my soul, I think that's why I connected with Peru, it's why I connected with Mexico. Like, when we were singing, I was always singing in Spanish, not English. Like, I could let loose in Spanish. Like, I could be more myself when I'm in that language and when I'm in that culture. And so, I don't know, maybe that's a past life thing, but yeah.
Hey,
So
you don't look Spanish.
I don't, but I've had a lot of people ask me if I'm Argentinian,
Oh.
because I don't have an American accent when I speak Spanish, and I always have to say, no, I'm actually American. And, you know, of course, when the pressure's on, or I wake up and it's too early, my Spanish goes right out the window, you know.
Do
But
you speak that to your second husband?
with his family.
Yeah.
He and I tend to speak English, but like his parents don't speak English, so we speak Spanish there. And the same with my first husband.
Yeah.
We spoke English, but with his parents. But for me, I was always learning it and studying it before them, and so it was just a natural thing, I think,
drawn to it,
in
yeah.
my life. And so I really thought I was actually in my master's program to be in that
position to be a
bilingual
bilingual social worker.
And so what do you actually call yourself now? Like, what is your career?
Well,
Is there a name to it?
I get called many things: life coach, shaman, healer, way shower. I mean, honestly, whatever anybody wants to call me. I try not to put a label on it, but
Sure.
to understand, I would probably say, I do have a certification in life coaching at master's degree level. That's what I got at ITP.
Okay.
But my soul's journey has led me to letting the shaman of me out, right? And learning from my brothers. And so people tend to call me a shaman because of the things that I see and the things that I do. I don't like to really call myself that. There's a thing out there, right? We don't,
Yeah, people. Yeah.
shaman. We just don't.
Just like I'm a reverend.
But just to answer your question, if you were to ask somebody else about me, that's probably
what
what
they would say.
they would say.
And okay, so let's define shaman for the listeners, because you did that before we got on air.
Yeah, there's so many different varieties, and culturally speaking. So some shamans, their mission is to pray on these temples, and that's all they do, and they just leave to go eat with the family, come home, right? So I'm not that, okay. Clearly. And other shamans, they call it a chakaruna in Peru. It's a bridge person, a person that has the ability to see in the cosmos, receive or retrieve information and come back. And there's many different ways to do that, like shamanic journeying, and that I don't even need to necessarily do that to get the information. I just am able to get it. I don't know how, other than I call it God or the universe or source, that feeds my consciousness with this information. Because I, like a client yesterday, we ended up channeling her sister in part of her healing. I've never met this woman. She never talked about her sister. And yet here I knew about her sister. I knew, roundabout how she had passed away, different things like that. Where's it coming? It's coming into my consciousness, right? Where's it coming from? I would say the whole consciousness, which for me I call God or the universe, or I've called it many things, creator.
But people seek you out. Why?
So they seek me out, different reasons, but for that help. And I feel oftentimes they don't even know why they're seeking me out. I feel their soul knows why they're seeking me out. They, like yesterday, she thought, oh, this would be fun. And I go, okay. Sometimes it's fun and sometimes it's healing.
Yeah.
And so I said, so I always try to come back and tell the truth, right? Like I be honest. So I said, yes, it may be fun. And I also feel like beyond surface, your soul probably also knows perhaps something even deeper that you don't even know. And so we just hold space for whatever's arising right now. You have the capacity to heal from it, because otherwise it wouldn't be releasing from you, right? And so I try to hold that sacred space of, like, this moment. This woman, once the sister came through, it was a downpour, right? Like there's a healing happening. She could feel her sister. I could feel her. Like there's a transcendental experience happening here. And yet we all felt, well, me, her, and her sister, it was just flowing, and so much love and so much peace. And at the same time, so we're held in that. We're not creating that. It's creating us, right? And so they seek me out. I think sometimes for the surface, oh, here's a shaman. That would be fun. Let's see what the shaman sees.
Kind of like
thing.
a psychic?
Like a psychic or a storyteller, or, whatever
yeah.
their version of shaman is. Right?
Yeah.
Because we all come with our own, like when I first heard it, I didn't even know what the heck that was, right? Like, and then when, my one teacher had said, oh, you're going to be a San Pedro shaman. And because I said, I feel like I have to work with the San Pedro shamans. And I was like, there's a difference? Like very naive. Like,
Yeah.
I had no clue. So we always come in with what we know, And so I feel like that's where they start. And then somebody else tells them, and sometimes they can't even explain it. They just say they just felt better, and people just want to feel better.
Do
right?
they come often? Are they repeat clients?
I have some that have been repeats for years, and most not. I try. How do I say this? Not try. That's not the right word, but I'm not looking for repeat clients.
You're not
Let's
looking
put it
for
that way.
dependency.
I don't want anyone.
Right.
In fact, there have been some people when they do come back and I can tell that it's dependency, I'm actually told to tell them I have nothing for them.
Okay.
And they might not like to hear that,
but it's because they're not doing the work themselves.
Right.
Right? And doing this work, and anyone that's had the path of a shaman will know. Talk about meeting your demons, right? And with the medicine, without the medicine, I think that's been my whole life, right? It is hard. I've wanted to jump the train many times, many times.
Meeting the demons. I like
Yeah.
that.
I mean, yeah, in whatever version of what that means for you. But yeah, so, so they'll seek me out for that healing, or sometimes they've heard, oh, you channeled so-and-so, and could you do that for me? And I'm always very honest. I don't get to choose the information that comes. So I said, we may get to that person. We may get to 5 more before that person. It just depends, what the cosmos basically is informing me that really is the healing. And so often if it's someone that's, channeled, it's because of the passing. They're still holding on to some story. They're not allowing themselves to grieve, something like that. And then body trauma. So I'm able to pick up if they've had abortions, if they've been raped, if they've, if it's the right time. So
Right.
I've never
Not
given
like just
it
at the grocery store.
right. Thankfully. And so when we're working in this session, we remove that deeply embedded trauma. So a lot of people will feel like they've done 10 years of therapy in one session. And that's just what they've told me.
And that's,
You know.
so you are basically
A healer.
a healer and a therapist like you originally set out to be.
Yeah, and if you look
But
at my
it's just-
degree, it comes in handy because it's
Yeah.
all like psychology based. So
Right.
I have the verbiage to then take this spiritual experience
Yeah.
to those who are not familiar with the spiritual realm and world, right? Because not every one of us have taken that path yet, can understand through
Right.
psychology.
So you can break it down to the layman.
Yeah. Well,
The
yeah.
shaman to the layman. Huh. I'm coming up with all kinds of titles. Anyway, oh my gosh. So I feel like we covered most everything. I would like to. Did you come up with this quote? We are all flowers, but if we don't open up, people can't smell the perfume.
It was a paraphrase from Joel Goldsmith,
Okay.
who it was a healer, a spiritual healer, up through 1964 at his passing.
Okay.
And and I paraphrased basically because once I heard it, I was like, whoa, just like you.
I love it. I know.
So he says it a little bit better.
like
But yeah.
like you think of a flower closed up.
Yeah.
It's not very pretty, and you can't smell the perfume.
Yeah. The essence of
And then when
what
it
the flower
opens,
offers.
it's all colorful, and then bees come, and
Yeah.
it's really kind of a neat metaphor. So I think that's basically the message that we're trying to share with the listeners here, is that it's important to keep paying attention to opening up, to keep being willing. How's that?
Yes.
To being open to opening.
Yeah. And also, if I may, like, you don't have to stress about being open either. That life has its ways. That's been my experience. So when life is knocking, just
Go with it.
go with it.
Okay.
Yeah, as the best that you can. I'll recommend the book from Michael Singer. It's called The Surrender Project.
Okay.
And he explains his awakening and that he goes on this journey. What if life kind of knows what it's doing? So he came back, rather than going to an ashram, he's like, I'm just going to show up in my life. Whether I like it or I don't like it,
Wow.
I'm going to accept it.
Wow.
And he ends up creating a couple different businesses that became multi-billion and still around, and we use today in the medical field and stuff. And he's like, if you would have asked me, and the same with me, if you would have asked me, oh, you wanted the shaman path, I didn't even know what that was, like,
PTA mom.
and trust me, sometimes I'm trying to get off of it. Like, it's hard, like these, and yeah. So, but when you're called, and just say yes and show up, and the answers will unfold. They have for my life, and I don't mean as in a finite, you're finished, but as in everywhere you are meeting life, you will have the answers.
I like that.
I like that a lot.
Not always on our time, but we will have the answers,
Oh,
right?
for sure. Yeah, sometimes you have to go through it to figure out the answer, you know.
Yeah.
Like that's why you're going through something, is because you're learning something through it, you know, all the traumas and all the hardship and all that, and even the good times you learn from too. But I think it all depends.
And if you think about people that have come back from near-death experiences, they all kind of say the same patterns or things, right? And it's about, there's really nothing there. Like all this grief and trauma and hurting each other, it's all like
Gone.
And
It's just
and
love.
for everyone, it's just love. And I feel that is the way of a shaman, is to help. First, you have to walk through, right? So I had to walk through how to let that love, and I'm always learning, so I'm definitely not saying I'm perfect at it, and I will have to continue to go through, you know, what I'm here to learn and stuff. But for to teach and help others to let that love, don't let anything. I mean, I could have let the sexual abuse close me down. I could have let this
Any
guy
one of
close
these
me down.
Right. You lived a lot of life.
Even things I haven't even brought up yet in this call, like, you know, like in our podcast, you know, so just keep blossoming, keep
let it-
opening.
I like
And
it.
that doesn't mean there's not discernment. So that's why I said I don't always feel to do these things, right? So something felt right, saying, okay, here I can share these stories and these things. Because I remember when I came back to serving with the cougar peed on you, and my entire staff laughed at me.
See,
Because I didn't know not to tell people, I'm from Kentucky. We talk, y'all, okay? So I just came back like, this is really cool. And they were
everybody's
like,
weirdo.
what the heck is wrong with her? What happened to her? You know?
Yeah.
And I love them, whatever. It's fine now. We got through that. But it's like you learn along the way who to share what with. Like it's that spiritual discernment.
Okay.
Not everybody's ready to hear.
And that's good to respect that as a shaman too.
Yeah. Oh, for
Not-
sure.
don't force
I
it
do
on
not
people.
say, yeah.
Yep.
If I can see it, and then I'll hear, not now.
Not now, but I'm
Or
here if
not
you need-
today, or whatever it
Yeah.
is. And yeah.
I have to get my dog out again. He's got an old bladder, but this has been wonderful.
I think this is a good place to wrap up. But I really like your perspective on life and people in general. It's very, like we said before, it's very fair. And I think you have a lot to offer people, when like your clients and our listeners both. So I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you. I mean, when my friend reached out and said, hey, they may call you, like, I think you should do it. You know, I was like,
We'll see.
I had just finished that surrender project book. So I was like, you know, if it will help
and
one person, then
And that's always the goal. And
that's what the shamans told me. They said, it just takes one.
just takes one. That's
Just
how
takes
it
one.
was. Yeah. So any links you want to share, forward them to our email
Okay.
because, and like some of those book recommendations, the one with the animals too.
Yes, Animal
you know,
Speaks,
and then anything about you
Okay.
and your work or whatever.
Sure.
You know, just please, you know, share, and we'll share with the listeners. So, well, I'm gonna get the Dunkel Man out. Okay, everybody.
thank you guys for watching.
Thank you.
Or like-